Manchester City are suing the Premier League over what they claim to be anti-competitive practices in relation to associated party transactions, or APT, rules that were designed by the Premier League and voted for by the other Premier League clubs. Manchester City's contention is that these laws are breach or break the laws of this country, the anti-competitive laws of this country, and so are unlawful and unfair. Some are seeing this as a brazen attack against the very fabric of football in this society, and that Man City are everything that is wrong with this game, which is super rich owners trying to impose their will on their game and ruining it. Others are seeing Manchester City as a hero, as a heroic attempt to go against the Big Six cartel and show the game for what it really is, which is a institution designed for the very few, masquerading as a democracy that is transparent and open. And all Manchester City are trying to do is lift the veil and show the ugly truth. And Newcastle are somewhere caught in the middle of this. And as Newcastle fans, and I'm as a Newcastle fan, I'm wondering, is this whole situation helping or hindering Newcastle United? We're going to do some of our own investigation. We're going to connect the dots. I'm going to give my verdict at the end. And as always, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. Even if it's just to say hi in the comment section, please do. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you share this. And let's get this show on the road, folks. All right, guys, so let me share my fun thumbnail and title with you, because I think it describes everything, I guess, from a Newcastle fan's perspective, what I'm seeing in this game. But in order to understand, first of all, what all of this is about, where to start from, let's actually narrow down what Man City are actually trying to do. What's the actual beef about? So as we mentioned, they're suing the Premier League over its financial regulation, specific set of rules around the APT, or the associated party transactions, that essentially these rules are there to limit clubs' ability to inflate sponsorship deals, especially those that are linked to the club's owners. City, obviously, as we all know, are owned by the Abu Dhabi Group and have several sponsorship deals with the companies from their region, the UAE organizations. And City argued that these APT rules, these associated party transactions are restricting their ability to compete financially. So, and are essentially illegal and also unlawful because they breach the anti-competitive practice of the UK. And so they've all got, essentially they've got it all to prove in the legal courts. And this is not linked to City's current 115 charges that obviously we're all aware of and that is coming up. It is totally separate, that those charges are totally separate to this particular lawsuit. What the lawsuit is, it sees it's a way of. But however, even though it's separate to this lawsuit, it is also kind of seen by observers and people, journalists and experts, as if, for instance, City were to win this, it weakens the Premier League's authority in order to enforce their rules in the first place. So obviously, if Man City actually prove, hey, Premier League, institution, your laws are corrupt and they serve the few. Then when it comes to Man City answering the charges, the 115 charges against them, they can make those same arguments in the courts themselves. So at the same time, so what have Newcastle got to do with it? Well, essentially, Man City are using Newcastle. They're doing a couple of things in this, and this is an article from if you guys can see on your screens. So I'm going to make sure you guys can see it in your screens. Yeah, you guys can see it. So this is from Martin Ziegler, a Times journalist. He posted this on his Twitter. I can't remember if he wrote this himself or he's posting it on. I'm going to say it's his, or hopefully it is. What he's essentially trying to say, there's a timeline, there's a connection in between commercial. So the Premier League have long required clubs in commercial deals to be of fair market value, but these have twice been toughened up in the 3 years. And obviously the last 3 years is there was a Newcastle takeover, and this whole thing links back to Newcastle. What Man City are suing the Premier League over is that part of their grievance, as it were, is that they believe the Premier League is specifically targeting Newcastle and Man City, and essentially Saudi-led or Arab-led clubs or Arab-owned clubs. And so they've also said that there's bigotry involved in this, and they believe that they have evidence for this. And they're saying, for instance, obviously following this, as it says in here, following the Saudi back in December 2021, following the Saudi back Newcastle United takeover, all associated party deals worth more than 1 million have to be signed off by the Premier League as being of fair market value before they are formally concluded by the club. So none of this existed, or it wasn't to this point until the Newcastle United were taken over. There is also rumors, and obviously we know that these lawsuits actually at the moment held in a secret location, in a secret court, and all of these things. But there's also rumors that Man City have evidence to show that part of the reason why Newcastle's takeover took so long. I mean, Manchester United folks think their takeover took long. It didn't take 2 years like ours did. And what they're saying is, what Man City are saying is that there was a strong lobby from a lot of the owners, including Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United, that wanted to prevent the takeover of Newcastle United. And if that can be proven, that'll be a real silver bullet for Newcastle to be able to use at their disposal, should they want to also sue the Premier League in the future. However, Newcastle have not done that. Other rules that Man City have talking about, and again from December 2021, the rules were changed. The Premier League's board has reasonable ground to suspect that there is an associated party deal or otherwise than at arm's length. Then an independent firm will determine whether this is fair market value. So the doesn't say to me that the Premier League needs any evidence. They can just think or believe or suspect, as it says, suspect that there is an APT situation going on. And obviously the third one is in February 2024, which is, I think, the straw that broke the camel's back for Man City, because I think they had a big sponsorship deal lined up. They said the Premier League toughened up the rules following the closest vote in history of the league, and it made clubs liable to be charged with a breach of the rules if they do not use reasonable care to ensure deals are of fair market value. The burden of proof is also on the clubs to show that they are. And obviously there are big deals that are essentially that we're hearing, that were rumored, that are being held up for Man City as a result of this. And I think this is what triggered this particular lawsuit from Manchester City. So there's something in it there's a lot to prove from Manchester City. They've really gone hard at it in terms of trying to say that the Premier League is racist, that some of this is bigoted, and that they're being targeted, and that these rules were specifically aimed at of our particular owners, and in addition that the system itself, obviously the Premier League prides itself on being one of the most democratic leagues, that all these rules that Manchester City are talking about were voted in by the Premier League clubs themselves. What Manchester City are contending is that, for instance, on these sponsorship deals, that you can't vote for something that is unlawful, that is illegal in the country of UK, but also that these laws force clubs to vote against their better interests. So there's a lot there to prove and have evidence for in Man City's case, and especially if they can prove things like, the Newcastle United takeover was held up because there was undue pressure from the top six, or clubs from the top six, or on the red half of the Premier League, as it's been reported. Should these things be proven, this could be absolutely earth-shattering for the football game as we know it here, not only in the UK, in the Premier League, but I think in Europe itself, it will reverberate. So for Newcastle United, we're not suing anybody. Nothing like that is happening, but our case has been used allegedly is being used to prove Manchester City's case against the Premier League itself, which is interesting. I wanted to also, should I go to here? No, in a minute. So I wanted to talk about the possible outcomes for this. So the possible outcomes, obviously, is if Man City have total victory, the game itself has to change. The Premier League, the institutions, the people that are in it, all of it has to be reformed. The rules have to be totally changed, and how they're governed and what happens in them has to be totally changed. It's going to be absolutely earth-shattering, should this happen. And I know that there's a fear from folks that, and it's not irrational. It's I totally understand it when they say clubs like Newcastle can get sponsors, and something that might be worth 20 million, for instance, they just turn it into 200 million. And I don't think, from what I'm hearing, and that is absolutely justified. And if I wasn't supporting Newcastle, supporting somebody else, I'd understand that concern. From the Manchester City point of view, from what I can hear them saying, is they're not trying to make the game lopsided and turn it from one cartel to another. What they're trying to say is they're trying to create an even playing field for all. What that looks like remains to be seen. Should Manchester City, the other outcome is Manchester City have a partial victory. So maybe on some points of the law, some points of that they're trying to sue the Premier League for, they win, and then others they lose. I think this will be depends on what those points are. You might see a relaxation or a total takeaway of some laws and some practices, obviously, in terms of sponsorship deals, who approves them, who doesn't, and things of that nature. And it's just a big old scrap between the Premier League and Manchester City, and nobody leaves totally happy and nobody leaves totally upset. For Newcastle, again, I think, and as I've watched the Loaded Mag, big up to the Loaded Mag, did a fantastic interview with Keith Patterson, and what he said and what they drew out from that is the main thing Newcastle will be looking at in all those outcomes is there evidence? Is there sound evidence to show that there was undue pressure put on the Premier League from rival Premier League clubs, especially those that are known to be in the elite spectrum, to stop this takeover? If there's evidence to show that, there is something for Newcastle to take away and to hold on to in the future. So I'll be very interested to see that in the future. The last part is Manchester City get totally obliterated in the courts and their case gets totally thrown out, in which case it can only hurt them. It can only hurt them when it comes to the Premier League and it comes to their 115 charges. Newcastle are sort of in a win-win situation. Obviously, in terms of we just carry on as is of what we have and how the rules are. However, Man City have 115 charges and the case is strengthened against them. The last thing I wanted to go down to and speak about was there's other lawsuits, or there's considerations of lawsuits from Aston Villa and others. So Aston Villa's owner, as you guys can see, Sawaris, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing his name, is also he's considering suing the Premier League. Obviously, we'll know that recently, I think this week and last couple of weeks, Aston Villa tried to get the 105 million deficit that is allowed for clubs increased to 135 million debt. As we all know, that is part of the PSR, the profit and sustainability laws, to increase from 105 million to 135 million, and that was denied. And on the back of this, Sawaris has announced that essentially some of the rules, this is me quoting him verbatim of the Financial Times here, so, and this is on Sky as well, some of the rules have actually resulted in cementing the status quo more than creating upward mobility and fluidity in the sport. The rules do not make sense and are not good for football. Managing a sport team has become more like a treasurer or a bean counter rather than looking at what your team needs. It's more about creating paper profits, not real profits. It becomes a financial game, not a sporting game. So some scathing comments there from the Aston Villa owner. Let's see what he does. Chelsea, on the other hand, and I'm going to extend this. I've recently, let me get this off. Excuse me. Oh, I got that one wrong. Let me show you guys. Chelsea, as reported by Matt Slater on June the 6th, another setback from the Premier League, tried to close the loophole that Chelsea exploited when they sold the 2 hotels. You guys remember that? To themselves, and it is at its AGM, but failed to get enough votes from other clubs. That's so interesting. So that opens the door for everybody else to do the same thing. It also lost a vote on making clubs self-report rule breaches. So there's some real pushback in the corporate world. There's some corporate warfare going on in the Premier League and its clubs. And so I'm particularly interested to hearing you guys' views. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. Send in your comments as always. What do you guys make of all this? It's absolute mayhem, as it appears so to me, in terms of the Premier League itself. For Newcastle United, in terms of all of this going on, Newcastle are in a win-win situation in terms of all the outcomes we've mentioned. My one concern is in the, and some people may not care about this, is in the court of public opinion. I've watched a lot of social media, whether on X, on Twitter, but also on the YouTube content creators and everybody else who have already kind of lumped Newcastle and Man City together. They're talking as if we've already breached rules, that we've already inflated sponsorship deals. Newcastle have not breached one PSR rule. We have not done anything underhand. And in fact, we're not the ones that are suing the Premier League. The other thing is, for Newcastle United, when there was a big fear, for instance, over the multi-club ownership, again, another rule that was imposed as soon as the Newcastle owners came into force. The moment Dan Ashworth whispered the name Ruben Neves, people started crying about multi-club ownership, and we had to do a big old vote for that. The Telegraph called it Newcastle-led rebellion. A rebellion, Telegraph, is that Newcastle had won. And in terms of multi-club ownerships, all the fears that people had that would buy Mbappe for 2 billion from one of our Saudi clubs and loan him back to us have not happened. In fact, all the Premier League, a lot of Premier League teams, including Liverpool, profited from that when they sold Firmino and Henderson and were able to rebuild their midfield. You can say thank you. So Newcastle, in my view, have been behaving amicably. I've outlined where I think Newcastle stand to win, or in terms of a partial victory or total victory for Man City. I don't think that they will be losers if Man City were to lose themselves. It is the court of public opinion where we all have to be ready for the details. Let me know what you guys think. Share your comments. Take care. Make sure, guys, that as when we're kind of talking about these situations and these scenarios, that we also pay attention to the detail. What is it that we're trying to ask of each other? And also try to take, in my view, the best of each other's arguments. So if Man City are trying to get to change the Premier League, to change its rules that they feel is unlawful, it's not because you can say it's because they want to turn a 20 million sponsorship deal into 200 million, or you can say and take them as for their word for it, which is essentially try to create a more level playing field for all. The other is also that if you're more for Manchester City side, is that there isn't necessarily, unless it's proven, of course, a corrupt cartel that's trying to ruin the game. And kind of, when we can do those arguments, but we end up going up round in circles. Obviously, we're relying on the evidence. This court is in secret. It's in a secret location. I can't wait to hear the verdict. I'm going to do a part 2 of this show. As I've said before, Newcastle, we're somehow in the middle of this. I'm keen to do these shows to clarify where I think Newcastle stand. Let me know what you guys think. Share your comments, guys. And until next time, guys, take care and God bless, folks.